Welcome to Chelsea's Vocation. Chelsea raised two children on the autism spectrum, Justice and Noe, into adulthood. They're the reason why she can't help but smile when she recognizes autism in another human, especially a child. Chelsea spent almost 2 decades studying this neurotype as a parent professional, learning how to better adapt her own behavior and the environment around autistic children to both encourage and foster their development. She hopes through this podcast that you might better understand how neurotypical people process your neurology if you're autistic, or how to better yourself as someone who values autistic humans and your relationship with them. Chelsea is a lifelong learner and expects you are too. So don't hesitate to reach out to her through social media comments or the contact form on our website with your own insights. If you're coming to this podcast after the first 5 episodes, you may want to go to the show and review one or more of those foundational episodes to know where she's coming from. Either way, we're glad you're here now.
As part of Mental Health Awareness Month, I want to make listeners aware of 3 things as they connect to autism. And if you like to dive deeper into the research, be sure to check out the episode description. I'll include the links to the articles I refer to and other terms that might evoke curiosity. Point number 1, there is significant heritability of brain-based differences. This applies to both autism and to diagnoses that relate to mental health. From an article, quote, family-based and twin studies have consistently found that both ADHD and ASD autism are highly heritable, each with genetic influences accounting for approximately 70 to 80% of the phenotypic variants, and a significant portion of them being shared between the 2 disorders. Again, that link is in the description. That was a study published in Frontiers in Neuroscience in 2021. I had to look up the word phenotypic, so just in case you didn't know what that meant, because I didn't. It's the observable characteristics or traits in an individual based on the expression of their genes. In another study, this one of 8 different psychiatric disorders, and this was published in Psychological Medicine in 2019, researchers found that half of those psychiatric disorders, including autism, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia, had strong ties to genetics, with 51 to 80% heritability estimates. Point number 2, there is significant comorbidity or simultaneously occurring conditions for autistics and mental health diagnoses. In a study using a newly developed diagnostic screener with autistic individuals, 91% of children or adolescents aged 8 to 17 and 31% of young adults aged 18 to 25 met criteria for one or more co-occurring diagnoses, including ADHD, depression, and anxiety. This is from the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders in 2020. So again, point number 1, heritability of brain-based differences. Point number 2, lots of comorbidity with autism and mental health diagnoses. This leads me to number 3. The brain is an organ, a really important one. If any other really important organ in our body weren't operating as we needed it to, we would get medical support. There is no difference between getting a physician's support for your heart, for example, and getting a doctor's and/or therapist support for your brain. Neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin play biological roles in behavior. How this applies to my family's experience. Both Pete's and my extended families have plenty of diagnosed and diagnosable brain-based differences. I had no idea that was significant until after we went to see a genetics counselor upon the autism diagnosis of our second-born. Both of our kids also have comorbid diagnoses, which aligns with my points 1 and 2 of the podcast topic. Both of our kids have had multidisciplinary teams supportive of their brain-based needs since they were in preschool, which aligns with my third point. What floored me when my children were growing up was that no field expert in the Wisconsin autism community was talking about this. So many symptoms our kids, and I use kids more broadly than my own 2 to include other autistic children, were expressing were rolled up into autism. But the wild thing was that when there would be a speaker from out of state or I'd attended a conference not in Wisconsin, there was some form of rhetorical question, who has just autism? As if they knew if autism was present, it was likely something else was there too. Therefore, it makes sense to me to talk about mental health awareness in the presence of autism. And that's why I invited my friend Betsy to be my guest for today's podcast episode. When I first remember meeting Betsy, it was in connection to her daughter and a student service the nonprofit I was with at the time was going to conduct in her classroom. Fast forward a decade later, and we've become good friends. One of the things I like most about Betsy is how self-aware she is. The benefits of her deep interest in all things mental health and healthy relationships spill over into the formal and informal connections she's made with other parents of autistic children over the years. All right, Miss Betsy, I've got 3 groups of questions for you, and they're doozies.
Yes, ma'am.
First, how do you wish to personally identify in the neurodiversity realm?
I struggle with the word identity. I know that I see the word differently than many of my peers, and I have seen it differently since childhood. I see the world so multifaceted through people's feelings and their perspective that they've learned, whether it's their family of origin or how they're regulated when they're dysregulated. So I kind of morph how I feel when I'm based around them. So when I think about my background includes being the adult daughter now of a complex, complicated family of origin. I'm a female who masks under symptoms of ADHD, which was an adult diagnosis for me. And that can present and look like anxiety with a mess of internal emotions and dialogue. I'm a successful leader in my financial services day job where I use my ADHD superpowers as a positive every day. And that was new to me when I figured that out. I'm a divorced woman who's learning how to date and trust again. I'm a girl who's trying to reparent herself through counseling with kindness and learning how to set boundaries. But I'll tell you, by far, my favorite part of my identity is mom. When my first child arrived into this world, it felt like all of that early pre-adult struggle to find myself and my purpose suddenly landed in my arms. That little boy was my everything. And for those of you who know our family, they know he still is my everything and will always be my baby, even though he now has a beard and towers over me at the age of 22. Watching him find his career path, find his tribe, be a man to the love of his life, and watching them together making adult decisions, man, they make them with kindness and intelligence. It's really just the most graceful thing to witness. When I think about how you and I met, my second baby is why you and I met and became friends. Becoming her mom was something I fought for through the world of infertility, and little did I know at that time that fighting to bring her into this world was just the beginning of some lifelong battles. Her first official, I say that with air quotes, diagnosis of something impacting her behavior was at 18 months old. God bless the GI specialist at Children's Hospital. What followed for additional diagnosis over the next several years of apraxia, classic autism level 3, anxiety, and a whole host of alphabet soup of comorbidity diagnosis has contributed greatly to my unique view of mental health. When I look at Anna and I view her symptoms, and symptoms in all people, I view them as an overlay or a cloak on the person. We humans are not our symptoms, which is why I struggle to answer what my identity is. My sweet non-speaking girl is now 18 years old, and watching her struggle to communicate her needs has wrecked me in ways that I couldn't have imagined the pain of before I had my Annie. In our autism community, there's so much focus on ability and talking about what people can become versus what they are. My view of autism is that autism is a cluster of symptoms. Some of those symptoms can make the person feel good about themselves and purposeful. And some of those symptoms can make their life more difficult for what's not only inside their brain, but how they're able to relate to the world around them. Some of the feelings of depreciated self-worth our autistic brothers and sisters feel because of their symptoms and how that makes them feel about themselves can be just heartbreaking. So in my perspective now as a mental health educated parent, the debate shouldn't be about whether or not we put our children through different therapies or medications or try to assimilate them into an holistic world. I think that's completely missing the mark. Each human on this earth was put here unique in their own right, but each human, diagnosed or not, all has struggles. And some of my daughter's symptoms cause her pain both physically and emotionally. I view it as my duty as her mom to get her tools for her mental health toolbox, to fight battles of access to therapy and services, and to serve her underlying needs. Every person in this world wants to be seen, heard, and belong for who they are. They want to belong whether they're having a pretty day or an ugly day. And I'm not talking about bad hair days. I'm talking about when we all lose our you know what. We all want to know that we're enough without being too much, that we're lovable, that we're attractive, that people choose us, that we were brought into this world to be in community with one another. But let's be honest, that community is not a perfect haven. Human nature creates judgment and anxiety, where we as humans get dysregulated based on our own abilities and perspectives. That, right there, I believe, is the crux of mental health. It's the battle of getting regulated to whatever environment you're in so that you feel safe, loved, and able to perform at the level you want to perform.
So, what do you see as the key to the mental health of our autism community and its members? When you consider the impact of a child's autism diagnosis within a family, what are some distinctions you keep in mind for moms, dads, and siblings?
Okay, this one is kind of my service in the autism community because I feel like so many members of the family are left behind. I first of all believe we have to honor the journey of not only the person with the symptoms indicative of a diagnosis, but recognize that they are just one member within a family where each person has their own journey to be honored. The parents and siblings each had their own lives before the diagnosed person entered this world. And those lives don't stop just because one family member now has been identified within the DSM-5. That is the ridiculous nature of our mental health community. And if we ignore the issues in the family of other people's symptoms simply because they have not gotten a formal label, we are not robots. And we all have symptoms as humans. I see it similar kind of to the new autism wheel of traits.
Betsy and I talked about this autism wheel of traits before. We love it. I'm going to make sure that it ends up in the description with a link. If you're watching on YouTube, then we'll make sure we've got it up on the screen for you.
So the autism wheel includes traits like social issues, sensitivity to physical surroundings, a need for routine, moments of executive function struggle, communication problems. And I don't mean to sound sarcastic, but like we all have a level of these traits at all times. It's just their fluidity in how intense they are depending on the day or the minute. So let's add to that wheel. Instead of thinking about it as just autism, let's think about the comorbidities, right? Attention and focus, sensory processing, anxiety, depression, different learning disabilities or learning styles, PTSD from bullying and relationship stress. So when I look at that framework, then I take the second step to recognize that our own internal vulnerabilities and the need to regulate them to feel secure has to happen. This is admitting to ourselves that, like our kids, we also have complicated internal reactions. We need to validate our real feelings to be internally seen, and to be honest, we need to respect ourselves. The second step, I like to think of it as kind of that instruction receive on an airplane. They say, put on your oxygen mask before we help our children to put on theirs. We as parents are constantly putting on the proverbial oxygen mask on our kids first in all parts of our lives. And there's no way that using up all of our energy and starving ourselves emotionally isn't detrimental to us. Our energy source as a parent, it's really essential to a happy home, I think. When you have a kid with autism, your learned ability to regulate yourself, your other children, teach them how to regulate themselves, gives you all a firmer foundation to stand up and balance on. So what this looks like for me is when I think about my value, my ex-husband's value, and my son's value, those aren't diminished because of my daughter's existence. Her needs are not more important than the rest of our needs. Her daily struggle, while heartbreaking, cannot be the sole focus of a healthy family. That kind of imbalance on only one member leads to resentment. It leads to children who are infantized and diminished from rising to their full future capacity. It leads to siblings taking on adult roles way, way earlier than they should for their own mental wellness and development. And as we've seen in my life, it leads to a divorce rate almost twice that of parents of children without disabilities. None of us can pour from an empty cup. I want to be Superwoman, but you do not have infinite energy. You do not have infinite patience. You do not even have infinite health. If I ran the zoo, if I was the bossy you-know-what in charge, if I had my way, every child's diagnosis would come with a required mental health professional for every member of that family. There's things you need to say behind closed doors. There's quiet dark thoughts that you think are ugly that you need to admit to yourself in a safe space. And you might need the help of a professional to help you walk through that. I don't care how balanced and how well-rounded, how smart you are. We were 3 humans before she came into this world. We had our own issues, our own dreams, our own thoughts. And to say that those things don't deserve the same amount of time and attention and love and vigilance, I just feel it's wrong. You can't diminish every family member's sense of self. It's not right. It doesn't serve your family, and it will shake the foundation until you're left with rubble. The breakdown of my marriage and the subsequent divorce is a cautionary tale. It's a cautionary tale of 2 parents who, to the rest of our community outside the 4 walls, we looked great. We looked like we had it easy. We were kind. We had everything under control. But within the walls of our home, we were crumbling. To save our family, we needed professional help, and I turned to a professional counselor. She helped me to build our coping toolbox, and I still use those skills and tricks every day to cope with the world. I'm happy and proud to say that our toolbox has given us a framework to stop crushing under the weight of some manifestations when you have neurospiciness in your family, and it's helped us come back out into the light.
I'm pretty sure everyone wants to know what's in that toolbox. So, what does being mindful of mental health mean to you as a mom? And how has that looked for other friends and families you've guided through the process?
So first, I'd be remiss to make it sound like I know more about this than the psychological community. I will tell you folks, Google mental health toolbox, Google crisis toolbox. My personal toolbox may be different than another mom's. And I'll be honest with you, it's different when I'm playing the role of mom versus being someone's girlfriend versus just being by myself. A crisis toolbox is a collection of skills, techniques, items that you can implement in seconds as soon as you start to feel stressed and overwhelmed. My first tool is the same in my toolbox and my autistic daughter's toolbox. And to be honest, it's the checklist I use when I'm dealing with other humans that I care for that seem to be having an off day. So it's the simple things we think of with babies. Eat, sleep, poop, water inside and out. Or a little more proper, when's the last time you had sleep or a nap? Are you hydrated and nourished? Do you feel clean, or do you need a minute in the shower? The second is a really cool thing that I learned when I adulted, which is, did you know that a full breath physically changes your blood, your hormones, and your muscles? Forget about the lungs. It goes all through your body. I'm talking about just 3 intentional breaths. 30 seconds of your life, look up box breathing or glow breathing or other breathing techniques. Third was to identify a safe parent timeout space. So often we think of timeouts as something we use as a punishment to kids to help their behavior. Oh, no. A timeout for mommy is awesome. So it can be a car, it can be a corner of your room, it can be behind a locked bathroom door, wherever you can find it. When you need 1 minute of a parent timeout, this is your special space. Feel free to leave a pair of earplugs in there if you have a screamer in your house, the way I did. But know that you sometimes best take care of everyone if you take a break. The fourth one is truly a mental health framework, so I'll walk you through it. It's called the worst case scenario game. The human brain evolved when we were in caves to focus on what's wrong. So for a moment, I want you to not fight it. I want you to lean into it, feel it deeply. Here's an example. My kid is not eating anything but plain noodles. My worry is the kid's going to become malnourished. My next worry is kid's going to lose half her body weight. Then kid's going to be admitted to hospital. Oh my God, what if kid's going to die? And you have to let yourself get there. Get to the ridiculous. Really feel it in your body. Now, if you close your eyes, do you feel the sour? Do you feel like a piece of steel wool is scraping in your belly? Find that. Give that feeling. Like, imagine its physical presence and focus on it. Don't try to stop it. Don't try to talk it out of whatever it's feeling. Give it your full attention for 90 seconds. And then I want you to honor its desire to warn you like you were in a cave as a caveman. Honor its trying to protect you from a predator in your caveman part of your brain. With you staring at that ball, giving it all your energy and focus, it will eventually start to ooze its power and get smaller. Smile at it. Tell it, thank you for warning you, protecting you. Thank you, little ball of pain, for caring about me and my family. But I'm no longer in a cave. I'm no longer a child of no control. I've got some power. I am the adult here. This is my home, and I can be in control. So in my house, the tool of this toolbox is represented by a quote on my wall that says, "Feelings are not facts." My second tool in my mental health framework toolbox is the reframe tool. You can reframe two different ways. The first is negative to positive. So let's play this out. My kid is having a horrible day, melting down, and we're supposed to go to Thanksgiving. This is horrible. Why can't we do nice things? Right? We've all been there as autism parents. The world is ending. Stop, breathe, find the silver lining. One of the silver linings could be, we don't have to drive 2 hours. We could just veg out, watch a show on TV. A pajama day? Maybe my spouse and I can each take an hour locked alone in a quiet room while the other guy's in charge, and then switch places. My mother-in-law has no valid argument today as I'm cashing in one of my "Oops, it's life with autism" passes today. Whatever it is, find an upside. Choose to find it. You have choices within your frame. The second way to reframe is the weight of importance or long-term impact. So if this never ever changes, whatever it is, the behavior, the situation, not one bit, can I find a way to take my control grip that I have off of the situation one finger at a time? So much of this parenting journey is about who has the control and who wants the control. Accept the things you cannot change. Start small or big. Give one of your other kids one night to be in charge of their own food and time. Maybe they only eat nuggets and they watch a screen. Will they die? Nope. Then take the yoke of burden off of you for the night. Accept your own strengths and weaknesses. You are not a superhero. For me in my house, this is on a post-it note that's in my car at all times. It says, "Disappointments are inevitable, but misery is optional." And the last thing that I think of when we as parents are so hard on ourselves about this is recognize that what you initially see as a weak trait might actually be a superpower to help others. My ADHD traits tend to benefit my clients at work and my kids. They feel seen and heard. You might appreciate your internal mind more as you lean into that.
If you are not a person who's come to this podcast before and looked at the description, that's where you're going to find all the goodies. You'll learn more about the amazing human that Betsy is, more about the resources and the terms and the research that we brought up in this episode. But Betsy, thank you for bringing depth to this topic of mental health and autism through both your vulnerability and your strength. Your commitment to getting up after you've fallen down is something we can all aspire to. Your willingness to reach your hand out to help is so admirable. I appreciate you.
I love you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Chelsea's Vocation. We hope it was valuable to you. If it was, we'd appreciate you sharing it with someone, reviewing it, and/or rating it. Subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are published. We wish you the best as you learn, maybe unlearn, and do better for yourself and those around you. Chelsea encourages you to be gentle with yourself, be gracious with others, and be protective of your own and others' dignity. Until next time, take care.